good people. You're listening to Lifted. I am your host, Carrie Lee, and today we are joined by Hugh Williams, who is a folklorist from the UK, who I'm really excited to talk about. There's something about fairy tales, folk stories, weaving of words into stories that has been something that I have loved my entire life. I used to sit at my great-grandmother Fazikis's feet and listen to her tales of the old country, and I could make her talk all day and I would never be bored from it. So today, I would like to get lost in some folklore with Hugh. Welcome to the show, Hugh.
Thanks for having me, Carrie Lee.
Oh, you're
It's good to
really...
be here.
Thank you for joining us. Now, tell the folks a little bit about yourself, just what you're all about, and how you came to appreciate this art of storytelling the way that you have.
Well, I've always been interested in sort of folklore, history, and some of the sort of more out there ideas related to Britain. What's out there, stone circles, megaliths, old castles, stories. Like, for instance, when I was a young boy, I used to walk around the town, and my mother would point something out. Oh, they used to do something in there, or a man died in that. And my dad would be the same. So it's always given me that sort of interest in what's the lore of the land. In other words, what the sort of the history, the heritage that's sort of soaked into the land and the buildings, and I've always been fascinated with peeling it away and finding it and telling others about it.
There's a lot to be said for when you're walking around in a space and you see you can see the lore kind of seeping from it, and you just need to know what happened in that space before.
Yes. H.P. Lovecraft. People talk about Lovecraftian, talking about sort of gigantic monsters from space, etc. But that's only one part of it. A lot of his stories, he talks about how he used to enjoy going out in the middle of the night and walking around the older parts of his town and seeking out these old places and echoes of the past. The deeper he got into the streets, right far down, you'd see some of the old, really old buildings and the ancient stones. That's what he was looking for, and I can identify with that. That's what I like.
And go ahead.
Go on.
Oh no, I was just say that Lovecraft, most people think of Cthulhu and whatnot. They're not thinking about him diving into the historic side of the space he was dwelling.
Absolutely. The story is one that really resonates with me, where he's describing the protagonist just takes to walking, as I said, around the city, sort of nighttime, early hours of the morning, and he likes to go in these old sort of buildings, yards, squares that are gaslit, and he finds himself going further and further back. He notices that the buildings are getting older, and he's going down these alleys and these crumbling places, and he follows a staircase, and he ends up in a room, and there's an old guy in there. And to cut a long story short, the guy is basically from the past, from hundreds of years ago. He was cursed to live forever, and he shows him these sort of visions of the future. But that sort of thing resonates with me. Layers, going back through the layers. The English landscape, in particular, when if you talk about, forget the cities for a moment, you go out into nature, into the countryside, the farmlands, the woodlands, the forests. Everything's been managed. Yeah, nothing's exactly as it used to be, but those layers have left their mark. It's like a huge sort of hard drive, a computer memory that keeps being added to, and you can feel those layers sort of stripping away if you sit down and you let it. If you see it and you feel it.
So it's like almost like a frequency that's been set there and that comes out every so once in a while, yeah?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. You've got to be tuned into it. I don't mean in a new age way, but I think you have to sort of let the how can I put it? Your sort of the daily buzz, the hum of work, tasks, chores, social media, phones, everything. You've got to get that out of you. Once that's been removed, then you can start to feel, what's around you. For instance, I was talking about a lot of the landscape has been managed. Nothing is exactly as it was, but a lot of the landscape has grown back to what it did used to look like. So very often you'll be looking out at a view which is exactly what your ancestors would have looked out on. There are areas of the Malvern Hills where you can look down across the forests and the farmlands, and it could be 1360, the date. It's exactly the same. And the same goes for the Peak District, the Derbyshire Peak District, the lonely moorlands, winds howling across them. It could be 800 AD, the Anglo-Saxon era. Nothing. You're feeling exactly the same, and you're walking along paths that your ancestors walked along, exactly the same. And they've left their memories on it. And it's the sort of the regular people that made those stories. We're not.
Absolutely.
People talk about the knights and the kings and that sort of thing. People talk about past lives, and they say they regress the past life, and they're always some great noble, some king or something. They're never just a plain Jane or Joe. And it was the normal people that the average Joe that made the land what it is and created those stories. It really was the folklore. Yeah, the elites, the nobles may have set the history, and we remember that. But the folklore, the stories, the almost primal fables and lessons that comes from the people, the masses, the sort of lower end of the social scale. They're
And
there
it was
because
actually
they're
the
in the
elites,
majority.
and the elites would go to them for their stories. The elites would go to them for their folklores. The elites would go to them for their scryings and whatnot.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Victorians liked, and some of the Georgians before them, there was a big craze for reconstructionism of our past, and they like to romanticize our barbaric ancestors. With these sort of romantic pictures of Saxons and Vikings with the big feathered wings on the helmets, etc., and these noble beards, and it's a great thing. And they liked to go around and collect old tales from the land, and they take the credit for them themselves. They collect them all up, and they go around pubs and inns and farms and speak to people and gather up all the tales, and then just take the credit themselves. They on the one hand they laugh and say, oh, silly superstitious villagers, still believe that blah 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 this that. But on the other hand, they're saying, oh, these great folk tales are very important to our history and people. So there's a bit of a, but it's definitely the average people, the people that worked the land, the people that fought on the land, died on the land. They're the people that make it. Their blood is soaked into it. Their sweat is soaked into it. That they farmed their animals on it. They lived off it. They grew everything on it. They ate everything off it. They're what made the land of Britain what it is. And I think there's something of that heritage. As if you want to look at it from a spiritual side, it's soaked into the land. It's always going to be there, and you've just got to feel it and find it.
That's really incredible, because I have to say that it's not like the UK and Britain gets the best rap for things in so many ways, but I think the royal aspect of things took away from the people that are there on the land. Even myself, and I was saying to you pre-show that I have both Welsh and Scottish heritage, but that was something that was never talked about. I know very little about my Celtic heritage. So speaking to you about things like this, it actually feels, and it's maybe a bit silly, but it feels like it's reconciling some things with me that I'm allowed to know these things now. If that's odd to my listeners, whatever, I'm an odd duck.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, the Welsh, they're a bit of a mixture of the original sort of Celtic, if you want to call it that, people that arrived in Britain after the pastoralists who built our megaliths and standing stones. You then got the wave of, we call them the Celts for the sake of convenience. But another big half of it is the Britons, the ancient Britons, who lived, through the sort of the Roman era, etc., and who were pushed out by the Anglo-Saxons. They went into Wales. Because the Welsh language itself, most experts agree that it's Brittonic. It's not Celtic. It's different because it's not. There's not many similarities with the Gaelic languages, as they call them, of Scotland, Ireland, and Cornwall. So Wales is unique. There's a lot of old Brittonic in there. It's a unique country, fantastic country. It's absolutely beautiful, and I'd like to spend more time exploring that. Definitely.
I'd love to go. We've talked about it quite a bit, the idea of traveling through all of our different areas. John, his family are Irish and Norse. And then, like I said, I'm just a handful of everything. So it would be wonderful to walk through all of these spaces where our ancestors walked.
Yeah.
It's something that I think North America doesn't have a good attachment to, and I feel in my lifetime that and so does John, that we're called back there. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but there's so much. Where do we go? Like the part of me would be in Wales, and then I would go visit here and there, and then I end up in Turkey, and then I'm in the Carpathian Mountains, and then you know what I mean? It's North America has so much detachment from so much, I feel.
I find it fascinating how Americans and Canadians, sort of say, "Oh, we don't have any heritage. There's nothing." They're completely disconnected from the European past, and then they say, "Well, all the heritage, it's native. There's nothing there." But yeah, of course, the native heritage, it may not be yours, but it's still there for you to find out about. But not only that, the colonists, look, that you're there now. You can't turn back time. Okay, so it is what it is. There's a lot of fascinating folklore, history, and culture from the colonial era. America, they've been there for sort of almost 400 years. That's long enough to have soaked a bit of heritage, into the land.
Oh, I can appreciate that, definitely. I think I miss what I was meaning though is that we don't have a lot of our. I appreciate my European heritage, and if it wasn't for the native indigenous heritage here, I would have never actually woke up to what the ancient idea was in Europe, if that makes sense. Like I would have never even attached myself to it. And as far as like culture here in North America, we definitely have culture. I'm not going to say whether I'm pleased with that or not.
Yeah, there's a tendency for people to jump straight on to the negative parts of it. I mean, and as you know, Britain has its fair share. We've had a bad rap. Everybody, the British colonists, everything. But look, the Hudson Bay Company, for example, in Canada, that's nothing to do with me or my family. That's a private enterprise run by elites, capitalists, trying to exploit a market to get as much money out of it as they can, while fur was fashionable. And it's the same with the East India Company from Britain, the same. These are private mercenary armies. And British people at home didn't even know it was happening. They're just told, "Oh, this is the British Empire. This is what we do." You can't blame the average person for that.
No, definitely not, because they had nothing to do with it. They were too busy tilling the land to give a care what the boats were off doing anywhere else. This is an elitist thing. It has nothing to do with the common man. But let's get off the politics, because I really, really want to delve into the storytelling, the folklore. And I would love for you to drop something spooky and maybe a little.
Well,
maybe a little wild.
You ask, what sort of got me into this interest. I live in Worcester. I was born in Worcester. I've only ever left for periods of time, but I always come back. Here I am, and I can't see myself leaving anytime soon either. And Worcester is a fascinating place, a mixture of the urban and the countryside. It's a very historic town, and it's so many eras, right from the ancient British the Roman era, the Anglo-Saxons, the Vikings, and then through the medieval era. And then obviously we got the English Civil War, which is a huge impact on Worcester because it was the beginning and the end. The first action and the last action happened in Worcester. So there's plenty of stories attached to all of that, and that's always piqued my interest. And there's the other thing, you remember as teenagers, people always tell tales about a place. You'll get like a cliff top or a lake or an old house, and people make up stories, don't they? Oh, a guy died in there and he haunts it forever, or another guy murdered his family in that house, and nobody ever goes in there. You know the sort of thing. Those sort of stories get passed around the town, don't they? And when you're teenagers, you all go out in the cars, don't you? Oh, let's go out to that place, that spooky old whatever. Those sort of stories. And that I used to hear a lot of that when I was younger. So as an adult, when I had the time, I decided to sort of find out if there was much truth in any of these tales. There's a place outside of Worcester on the way to Hereford. There's an old church, and it's called St. Mary's Church, and it's almost completely lost to nature. It's crumbled and collapsed. The roof's caved in, barely anything left, and it's just hidden in trees. Now, there used to be a village there called Avonbury. The village is gone. It's just vanished. Now, that when you look back through the records and the local accounts, the stories that came out of that place, for example, there was a guy who burnt down the bishop's house for whatever reason. He had some kind of beef with him, and he was hanged for it. So his ghost allegedly haunted the church while it was still running. And they brought in several priests from several different dioceses because no one could get rid of him. And they held exorcism after exorcism after exorcism. And eventually they claimed, this is all written down in an account by a parson, that they trapped his spirit in a box, this silver-lined box. And they placed the box, they buried it in the silt in the bottom of the river underneath the bridge next to the church. And they claim that it trapped his spirit there ever since, and he's never moved. Well, about a century or two later, there was a local lady who they claim was a witch. Now, she was, the usual accusations, making milk go sour, crops ruin, that sort of thing. There could have been any kind of beef with her, but they refused her a burial in consecrated ground. So they claimed, again, I don't know what priests, vicars, etc., are doing writing accounts of this sort of thing, but apparently that her remains were placed underneath that bridge again. So now she's in the same place this guy's box was put with his soul inside. Well, fast forward years later, archaeological excavations around the place, we're looking under the bridge, they found a box, a silver-lined box. They opened the box, there's nothing in it. Now, there's your evidence that it happened. Whether or not they really trapped a guy's spirit in there, I don't know. But the box was found and it was opened. And I find it bizarre that that's happened. Now, a few years ago, 5-6 years ago, a poor guy was quite brutally murdered along the lanes near that church. It was some kind of drugs thing. And they were driving around with the guy's corpse in their car, and they looked for a place to hide it. They threw it in the river underneath that bridge with no reason why. It just looked like the right place. So there you've got 3 people all attached to that bridge. Their spirits, forever tied to just that spot underneath that bridge.
The energies just there.
Oh God, that old church has got such a reputation. So people used to tell stories about Avonbury Church, and people used to go over in the cars and and have all night vigils with candles and torches, and trying to film something and screaming and. There's my brother said that a good friend of his, if you ask him about it, he'll just walk away. He won't even talk about it. He was that terrified of spending the night out there. So there's a story and a place for you straight away. And that's the sort of thing that fascinates me.
You've got a wonderful group, Mysteries of Mercia. Am I saying that right?
Mysteries of Mercia, yes.
And it is fascinating. Like I said, I love storytelling. I love folklore. I love it. It's reading and telling stories and listening to stories is just something that it brings me back to, I think, a nourishment and a nurturing. There's nurturing in storytelling that I absolutely, I think we all crave in different ways, and storytelling is the way that I get mine, I guess. But reading through these most days it's so nice to break up the monotony from what you see on social media, that you get to lose yourself in something that's different and ask yourself a bunch of questions, and you're constantly wondering, oh, I wonder if that's true. Or how did that happen, or it, and the stories, that the way that you paint a story, I don't want to inflate your ego, because it's not that, but it is quite lovely. And I can picture absolutely everything that you're talking about. The post the other day of the musket shots in the side of the building. Do you want to talk about
Oh
that a little bit?
yes, that's poetic. Yes, where England's sorrows began and where they were happily ended, as the saying goes. And as I say, Worcester was the place where the English Civil War began and actually where it ended. There were three periods of conflict. We call them the wars. Charles I, obviously, I don't know how much of this history you know or the listeners know, but obviously it was a conflict between Charles I, the monarchy, against the Parliament led by Oliver Cromwell, which raged through England for 9 years. The very first action happened at Powick, a village just outside of Worcester. Now, there's an old medieval bridge. It was began in the 1300s, with bits later added onto it. It's still there, and it still looks much as it did then in the 1600s. Now, before any sort of major battles had taken place, now this is just down the road from the church, by the way. Before any major battles had taken place, Charles was getting all his silver, his gold, his money all together in one place. He wanted it put in Shrewsbury in the vaults. So he ordered one of his generals to get that wagon train across from Oxford all the way to Shrewsbury. So they stopped at Worcester, rested, and they began to set out. Well, General Fiennes, who was sent by Cromwell to intercept this wagon train, and they were going to ambush it on the road outside of Worcester. So he made his way to Powick, and there they are. Now, they didn't send any sentries or any sort of scouts ahead. They were quite gung-ho. When they heard that the wagon train had set out, right, that's it. They could not wait to get stuck in. Well, Prince Rupert of the Rhine, who was a great sort of hero of the royalist cause, the sort of the Uber Cavalier, he was dispatched down to protect this wagon train and to stop any ambush. So he made his way down with his cavaliers, his mounted cavalry, down to Worcester. Now, they set out. They hadn't gone into Worcester yet to see if the train had left or not. They stopped to rest in a meadow right by Powick Bridge under a huge tree. He didn't put any sentries out. They all just got off their horses, let the horses rest, drank some water. Out the corner of his eye, he sees a movement. Incredibly, Fiennes had gone across that bridge with his men, two abreast. They emerged out into the very meadow where Prince Rupert of the Rhine was resting. And they both sort of looked at each other. There must have been a sort of 5 seconds of just what the hell. And Rupert leapt on his horse, didn't even shout, he just shouted charge, didn't even put his hat on, and just charged into them. Now, that bridge, you're lucky to get two people abreast, even two horses, but apparently that's what they squeezed across. In their panic, the Roundheads, the parliamentarians, tried to turn their horses and get back across the bridge. The guys on the other side of the bridge don't know what's happening. So they're pressing against it, and you've got chaos. Rupert and the Cavaliers were just in them, slashing, hacking, stabbing, tearing them apart. The panic, there were people falling off the bridge, breaking their necks, falling off it. Guys were getting trampled by their own horses. Absolute chaos. They took, and the men behind it on foot were all flattened and trampled by the horses, panicking to get off the bridge. Absolute terrible tangle of blood, screaming, panic, awful. And Rupert, they were terrified of this man. He was a badass of the era, and he was in them, sabers, slashing and stabbing. Well, they got off the bridge. Now, Rupert and his cavaliers didn't bother chasing them. They just kind of gave them a sort of sending off and then that was the end of it. Well, they were so scared of the Roundheads that they rode like the devil was behind them all the way to Pershore, which is 10 miles away. They did not stop. When they arrived at the camp of the main parliamentarian forces, such was the fear in their eyes that half of the camp actually thought they were being attacked, and they got up and started riding off as well. Just absolute panic, yeah. So there, and of course the silver and the gold made its way to Shrewsbury without incident. Now that bridge is still there, and you can imagine all that death, all that terror, all that panic. The stones, they've seen it, they've absorbed it, the blood, the sweat, the fear, the men who fell in the River Teme underneath, who were washed down. It's when I walk across it and I stop and I listen and I think, I can feel it there. That meadow. You take the buildings away and you just look at the trees and the fields. You can imagine what it was like there.
Oh yeah, and the other thing, this is the same bridge that you were talking about where the box was buried?
No. This is a different place. We're back in Worcester now.
Okay.
Now, you said the church, okay. We walk 100 yards and 200 yards up the road and you've got the church. Now, that church is peppered with musket balls all along the side of it. No, but why? Well, it turns out 9 years later, in the same month of September, almost to the same day, the Battle of Worcester began. And the Roundheads, we now have the entire Roundhead force, led by Cromwell himself, descending on Worcester because Charles II, Charles I's son, is out for vengeance against his father being beheaded, and he wants to take the throne. Now, cut a long story short, his dream slipped away through his fingers. He brought a Scottish army down with him because there was no royalist army in England, for him to use. So he's ensconced in Worcester. So they started making their way down through Powick, and this time every single hedgerow, every single field was fought for. Muskets, pikes, sabre, the lot. And some of the royalist men hid inside the tower, and they climbed to the top, and they were using that tower to spy what the Roundheads were doing. And they were using flags, banners, horns, whistles, etc. to communicate. So they brought a small bore cannon up, just a small brass thing, like a pipe, and they started blasting them with it. And they blasted and blasted away to entice them to get out. When they eventually came out, they were cornered, and they were put up against that wall, and they were shot with muskets. There's a firing squad, and it's all still there today. All of those holes are still there. The pictures are there in my Facebook group of them. I don't know why the diocese of the church didn't have it repaired, why they didn't have it removed, I don't know. But they are there to this day in the shape, around the sort of head height of men, all blasted around it. And then you've got the cannon, the small bore cannon shot all the way up the tower. It's incredible that those stones still hold that memory. It's and then as you go into the city, you've got so many more memories from the Civil War. The sort of when the gate. I don't want to go into a description of the whole of the Battle of Worcester, but you've got our Friar Street and New Street. You've got the old Tudor buildings, the old black and white Tudor buildings, and you can get a sense of it on a quiet day what it may have been like down there, because the final retreat was back up that street. The parliamentarians, the Roundheads, smashed through the gate, and Charles rode up in terror up to his headquarters at the top. The Sir Roland Berkeley's house. Now, there's a pub there called the King Charles House. It's an old inn, and that's where he hid. He hid behind furniture while the last of his cavalry made one final desperate charge down the street. There's a post about this in my Mysteries of Mercia group as well. Now and then when the coast was clear, he slipped out of the gate and out of the city and off to exile in France before he was brought back. But a lot of those buildings, the sort of holes, the damage from the cannons, it's all still there now today.
It's interesting that they didn't cover it.
Well, after the Civil War, the England was in a sort of state of economic recession, and if nobody can afford to build something, they're not going to build it. So the city was in ruins for a long time. It was only much later on, at the restoration of the monarchy, that they petitioned King Charles for some money to start rebuilding the place. But they kept a lot of these places. Just a little bit further up the road there's a coffee shop, and there's an alley down the side of it, which is part of the Costa coffee. Now, inside that, it always used to fascinate me. When I was a child, my mum showed me, said, look at this down here. There's this sort of white painted alley, and there's an alcove in the wall, and there's a head inside it, like a concrete head inside this alcove. And my mum used to say, there's a guy's head inside it, his actual skull, and she didn't know who it was. So I made it my business to find out. And it turned out it was connected to the Civil War. Yeah, there was a guy, a tailor called Thomas Geese, who snuck out of the city, went up to Cromwell and told him that he was going to be attacked that night. They're going to try and do a special forces attack, if you like, with their cavalry to try and kill him. So he thanked him very much for it, and Geese snuck back into the city. But he was caught and he was hung. They sawed his head off and they made a mask of it, and then they put it into that alcove, and it's still there today.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, just quietly down an alley, just in this little alcove, there's this guy's head that's sort of in pain with his mouth open, kind of looking there, encased in concrete.
That's incredible.
It's utterly bizarre, and there it is. And it's in, if you use the loo in the coffee shop, you can go down a fire escape, and there it is. You can see it.
Well, that's something.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I would never think you would think that these things would be removed. North America would have removed them.
No.
And I love how the old country seems to want to leave things exactly as they are, to serve as a warning or a memory or a tale or whatever.
Oh,
not to be erased. This is the thing, not to be erased somehow comes to mind.
It's something to do with the American presidents, because Thomas Jefferson and John Adams both visited Worcester. They went on a tour of Europe and they visited Worcester because they were fascinated by the Civil War. And they stood on top of the Fort Royal, which is a fort just outside the old city gates. And Jefferson gave a speech saying that you should preserve this place. He said every Englishman should make a pilgrimage to this place at least once in his life. And he made quite a big thing, and they couldn't understand why more wasn't made of it. So it could be something to do with that. After that visit, they sort of made some agreements to preserve all of the Civil War sort of law. Yeah, it's fascinating. But there's the ghosts and the various things of Worcester and the various sort of places.
Let's talk about the ghosts. Let's talk about actual ghost tales. Tell me some of your best, or you can save some for something else, but I think it's a good time for a ghost tale.
I like ghost stories, and I like the story to stand as it is. I've never been one of these people who like to investigate and strip it apart and deconstruct it. Because you have these paranormal investigators, they call themselves. You know what they're like, and I'm not going to knock it. That's what people like to do. That's fine. But you got these guys sort of on their all-night vigils with their recorders and thermometers, and they're getting pictures of orbs and and all the rest of it. And it's all very. It takes the magic out of it. It takes the fun. It's like we used to believe in UFOs. We used to be fascinated by them, the thought of aliens and greys and all the rest of it. And then along came the X-Files. That started it, and it all became sort of postmodern and ironic and tongue-in-cheek. And now it takes all the mystique out of it. And I feel the same with the ghost stories.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that these people that just gather and oh yeah, well, it's an anomaly, it's a phenomenon, and we recorded an orb, and sort of crowding into places, that just takes all of that out of it, that romantic side of it. Because to me, the story, the tale, is the most important thing. And you're going to reduce an awful sort of murder mystery or a tragedy or something like that, or an incredible building. You're just going to reduce it to pictures of dust motes floating about.
Well, because they need their proof so that they can prove it to all the people that don't believe it, and they can't just be happy with it in themselves, which is.
But then what? What then what? Okay, you've found a picture of your orb. What then what? What happens? What have you got?
Nothing, just
yes.
the story's gone.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no tail,
Whereas,
there's no shiver up the spine, there's no hair standing up on the back of your neck. There's no mystique, there's like a fire that burns in a tale. And when you what's the word? When you fill it with technology, it takes
yeah,
all of that away.
yes, it's the same with a lot of paranormal ideas. As I said, the UFOs before. I did vote the same. I used to enjoy the X-Files, but I was disappointed that this sort of mythos had been turned into a joke. It was just seen as and that's how sort of today's people sort of see it. For instance, recently you had those video recordings released by the American authorities of these UFOs.
Hmm.
You know the ones I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I mean, I
just like
know they
last
came out
month.
about yeah, I know they came out about a year ago, but for some reason they came back into the news, and they were examining them on the Joe Rogan show, etc. And the reaction was sort of, well, they're a bit crap, aren't they? Oh, this the
Right.
best aliens have got. Everybody was laughing at them, saying if this is aliens, they can shove it. What on earth is this? A blurry dot. Aliens are crap. Aliens are, and it's that sort of thing. It takes all of that mystique out of it, and people are in danger of losing that side of them, that side of their personality, that side of their soul, where they can take stories in, and that story they then carry that tale, that fable with them, and they can pass that fable down to their children, and then it becomes part of the culture, and it becomes embedded in the land, in the people, in the country, and we're losing that. We're losing that because
That's
everything
true.
is just an ironic postmodern thing to laugh at. It's that's what it seems to be, and it's
And
the
it's
same thing with.
shameful.
Yes, it is. It's the same, like I say, with ghosts. And this is my. If people want to investigate the paranormal, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely great, as long as you have respect for the place that you're visiting. You don't just burst your way in. I mean, you've got to laugh. Why on earth, if someone's soul was resting in a building, why on earth are they going to play some game of knocking walls with a load of guys YouTubers who burst in? Oh, knock if you are there, and I'm certainly not going to. If I was going to haunt this house that I'm living in now, I find that side of it bizarre. But no, there are things like when I was younger. There's just as you head out of Worcester, you take the road to Stratford-on-Avon. You go through the Spetchley Estate. The Spetchley Estate is a big series of fields, land, mansions, etc., which is owned by the Beauchamp family, who have owned that since the Norman era, ever since the Norman conquest. It's the same hands it's been in. Most of the land in England is like that. Now, there's across there's a white sort of wrought iron bridge. It's white painted that spans the road high up. It goes across it. You're driving through a sort of a chasm. The story used to be, look out for the white lady. Whenever you drove under it, everybody said to each other, we might see the white lady. And the white lady, apparently, the mansion was on one side of the bridge and the church was on the other. And she was a member of the Beauchamp family who was to be married. And she walked across the bridge to the church in her wedding dress. And they say that the bridge collapsed, the plank broke, and she fell through it, broke her neck. And her ghost haunts that bridge forevermore. And if you're that unlucky person, you're driving the speed down there, you're going to look up and you're going to see this horrific vision of a lady in a stained wedding dress walking across it. You may even see it falling down.
Oof.
That every time I go under it, I'm 51 years old. I still shiver. A shudder runs through me whenever I drive under that bridge.
Oh
It's,
yeah, I have the shivers now myself.
yeah,
I love that kind of thing though. There's certain places where you can go to here in Canada. There's a place called Screaming Tunnel. There's another place, Blue Ghost Tunnel, where a train derailed and hundreds of people died. These spaces, like we've gone in, my husband and I, we love to ghost hunt, but not like Not with devices, it's just our senses and our fear,
Yeah.
our healthy fear. We like that feeling though. There's something thrilling about being a little scared. And I mean, not, it's a different type of fear. It's a, it makes you feel alive. There's something wild about it.
Oh, this is it. Some stories, some of the ghost stories, they capture the imagination and they become popular. Are you familiar with the Who Put Bella in the Witch Elm?
No, I
You've
don't
heard
think
that
I
story?
am.
Some of your listeners may be familiar with it. Near to Worcester, there's a place called Hagley, and there's a series of hills above it called the Clent Hills. Hagley Wood is on the slopes of the Clent Hills. Well, some boys were looking for birds' eggs. They were going there looking for birds' nests and looking for rare eggs. They collect them. This was during World War II, so sort of 1942. Well, one of them, he climbed up on top of a witch elm. He put his hand down and he felt inside it for a nest. He felt something hard, grabbed it and pulled it out, and it was a human skull. They had a look, and there was a skeleton and some other bits and pieces shoved inside the tree. So the boys just ran off. They tore off home, and they all swore to each other that they would never breathe a word of this, because they thought they'd be the ones getting in trouble, for going out in the middle of the night looking for.
Mm.
So anyway, one of the boys could bear it no longer, and he told his parents. His parents said, "Look, you did the right thing." They got the police in. He led the police to it. Sure enough, there's a corpse of a young woman. She was stuffed inside this hollow tree. She was skeletonized, she was rotted, but there was still some clothes. She was missing her right hand. Well, they found the hand on the path about 10, 15 feet away. It was partially buried. To this day, no one's ever found who she was, why she was killed, what on earth she was doing inside the tree, why her hand was removed. Nothing. They just have no idea who that poor girl was and what
I
had
want to
happened.
say that I've heard this before, but that like it's been changed. A lot like there's a couple stories that you've told and I feel like they were brought back here and then
Well, this
changed
one
a
is
bit.
very, very real, but I can understand how somebody would have taken that and transported it somewhere else and made it an urban myth. I can
Right.
understand. This is very much, I've researched this. It was a sort of
No, no,
favourite
I
case.
believe you that it's real. I believe that it's a story that originated, and I'm starting to, I think I'm starting to realize that a lot of the original stories just they came here and then they were changed to suit the surroundings for the lessons needed.
Yes, yes. I mean, I don't know if there's a lesson in this one, but other
Well,
than
no,
don't
not
avoid the
always.
night time. But lots of theories were put forward, and one of the most popular ones, and it was witchcraft, that she was put there as some kind of sacrificial offering inside the tree,
Oh,
and her hand was removed as part of the ritual. Other people said that they cut the hand off to use as a hand of glory. They were going to have this kind of mummified hand to use to, what a hand of glory
oh,
is, don't you? Yeah.
yeah.
That they were going to use as one of them. Others said that it was a gypsy curse. There were so many things, weird, bizarre, but they've still never identified the poor girl. The dental records, everything. The
Oh,
theory is that she's not British. She came from somewhere else during the war. They say that she was a spy, a German spy, a Dutch spy. There's lots of tales of Dutch spies parachuting into the woods and sort of unpacking and then melting into the population because she
and
had
there was
on
a lot of
very,
women at the time that were responsible for that.
yes,
Kind of like a
yeah,
honeypot.
yeah, yeah. Well, she was wearing very, very plain clothes, and they said that with her mousy hair, and her hair had never been coloured or bleached or anything like that,
Oh,
they think that she would have really merged in. So if you're a spy, that's what you're going to do. You don't want to stand up. So this mousy little tiny girl, sort of working at a munitions factory, something like that, gathering information, moving about, talking to people. There could be something in
yeah.
that.
That
Definitely.
sounds definitely something that would be legitimate, right? Especially in the 40s.
Well, somebody knew who did it because a couple of years after her body was found, somebody wrote on a wall in Birmingham, who put Bella in the witch elm.
Oh my God, I just got shivers all through my body. That was awful.
And this got everybody talking about it again, because the witch elm, it was obvious what they were talking about. So we've got Bella now. Who is Bella?
Oh
Now,
my
a lot of people were saying that was a common gypsy name at the time. It must be a gypsy curse. She was sacrificed, kind of a Wicker Man type thing. A lot of people talked about that. So they cleaned the graffiti off. They were still no closer to finding anything out. Well, during the 1970s, the graffiti reappeared. This time, it was closer to the murder scene. On a hill opposite, where basically, if you stand on top of Witchbury Hill, you can look down on the woods where she was found. The tree is long gone, I'm afraid. So any ghouls hoping to go and find the tree, it's been pulled out. It's completely gone. But there's a big brick obelisk that was built there. It's been painted onto the obelisk. Who put Bella in the witch elm?
Oh my.
It gets scrubbed off and it gets repainted. Every 5-10 years, they scrub it off and it just reappears again, exactly the same.
Oh
Who put
my.
Bella? Yeah, it's crazy. Somebody knows what happened.
Well, and it's not like
keeps,
it was that long ago, really. We're looking at 80 years, yeah?
yeah.
Oh,
If not 46, yeah, 80 years, yeah.
I just did math. Everybody be proud of me. Quickly.
It's a fascinating mystery, and it really captured. Yeah, people have done YouTube videos about it. It's songs about it. There's even a band called Who Put Bella in a Witch Elm.
Well,
It really captured the imagination.
now that you've told the story, and the more that you've said it, I'm like, it sounds familiar, but I have no idea where it's familiar from, or whether I've read it before, or if it's something that I watched. And the more that you say it, the more uncomfortable I get.
It's one of those. But the bizarre thing is, if it was something to do with witchcraft and it's during World War II, there were other murders around the area which bear those sort of hallmarks. Because I don't know if you're familiar with the Charles Walton murder. Maybe not.
It's okay. Tell me anyway.
I'll cut to the chase on this one. A guy named Charles Walden was a worker near Stratford-on-Avon, a village near there. He was a simple guy, but he had a reputation of being a warlock, being a witch. They said that he bred toads in his house, and he was a horse whisperer. He could cure any ailment on the sort of the farm animals. But if he didn't like you, he could make your crops fall down. They said he was a witch or warlock. A lot of people disliked him. A lot of people liked him, but a lot of people disliked him because of that. Well, one morning, I think he just turned 71. He was still working hard. The poor old guy was found murdered, savagely murdered. I mean, really savagely. Someone had taken his stick, they'd smashed it over his head till it broke. They cut his throat with his own billhook. They then took the pitchfork, they pinned him through his body and into the ground with the pitchfork. And then they threw the billhook at his throat and it stuck in. And they ran off and left him. Now, it's been described ever since as the witchcraft murder because they think it was symbolic, the pinning to the ground like a witch so they can't rise up again. And some have said that there were crosses carved into his body. I don't know. It could have just been an argument because overkill is usually when it's a rage killing. There's anger involved. That's usually when that sort of overkill happens. But there's another bizarre murder during World War II. Well, again, that's another one that's captured the imagination. But there's a third one in the Midlands in Mercia, which has always sort of haunted me. There's a guy called Harry Dean who became fascinated with a place called Bredon Hill. I'm fascinated with the place as well. It's a hill just sort of outside the Cotswolds, but it's made of Cotswold stone. And it's got a reputation for witchcraft, old ceremonies. There are megaliths dotted around it. On the top, there's a big stone called the Elephant Stone, which they used to say was a sacrificial altar. There's a Bronze Age burial mound. There's remains of medieval stocks. There's so much sort of history soaked into this hill. It's incredible. They found a Neolithic henge. There's sacred springs, the lot. But this guy, Harry Dean, became fascinated with that side of it. And he got it into his head that there was something going on. There was a group of people, worshippers of something. There was a cult, a pagan cult, and they were up to something. And he was determined that he was going to unmask them and he was going to get like a newspaper scoop. Now, this is 1939, just on the outbreak of World War II. So, for reasons we will never know, this is what I find bizarre. Harry got up from his job. He was a solicitor's clerk. You know, he worked for a firm of lawyers. Now, in his suit, tie, even his trilby hat, his shoes, he went walking up the hill straight. He got the bus straight there. Why, I don't know. He was seen by witnesses walking around on the summit, looking like he was looking for something or waiting for something. Wow. Well, the guy didn't come home. So his wife implored all his friends, look, can you help me to go out and look for him? I know where he'll be. He'll be on that bloody Breeden Hill because he's obsessed with it. So they got the police out and everybody's looking for him. Well, they found the poor guy. He was dead and he was lying amongst some ancient rocks. Now, I say ancient rocks because they were arranged there as a sort of megalithic cairn. The guy was crumpled up and he was dead and he'd been strangled. He'd been choked to death with his own tie. Now, it's very, very, very swift autopsy, as you would call it, or post-mortem, as we call it here, was carried out. Same night in the village hall by a local doctor. And she immediately said, it's asphyxiation, accidental. He's obviously fallen over. He stood on his own tie and he's choked himself to death, which is just ridiculous. And that's case closed. And that poor guy he's obviously gone up there on a very important, I think he was going to meet somebody up there. Why he'd go up there in his suit and hat and everything, not suited for climbing, and then to be wandering around in the dark down in this quarry where there's burial mounds, there's a megalithic cairn, and to be found dead in it. That guy was murdered. He was murdered.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a ritualistic murder. So you've got 3 horrible, nasty, ritualistic murders, all roughly around World War II, all around the same area. So that there was something going on around that time.
Okay, so what's your take? What's your takeaway from that? What do you think? What are your thoughts on what was going on?
There was a murderous group of, some kind of cult. Were they death worshippers? I don't know.
That makes sense.
I can't go into detail because I don't know. But I keep repeating the phrase, somebody was up to something. There's definitely somebody was up to something. There was a kind of, Breeden Hill is a bizarre place as it is. Even today, there are things like that. There were so many rumours of groups of people doing things, ceremonies, rituals, etc. For what reason, I don't know. Everybody says why would they do that? Why would they commit to murder? When you get into a cult, you look at the Manson clan, look at all these groups of cults, etc. Yeah. People would do anything once they're in a cult. If you're under the control of a psychopath, if you're under the power, the spell of a psychopath, and that psychopath wants to use you as their proxy murderer, they'll get the same thrill from you murdering someone as if they'd done it themselves. That's what Manson was like.
Yeah, no, that's an absolute fact because it's just puppeteering, right?
Exactly. Nail on the head.
Yeah.
And I think something like that happened. That poor guy was lured up there for some reason. Maybe somebody said, look, we'll show you, we'll let you into our group, but you can't tell anybody about it until afterwards. It may have been. Some have suggested to me that it's Masonic because of the tie. The strangulation. They think that was Masonic. Because with all those rocks lying around, it would have been easier just to bash him over the head from behind.
Yeah,
But
no, exactly. But there's more to it than that. They could have done it much quicker, easier without any.
yeah.
That's interesting. All
Yeah.
right. What about I'm just bouncing all over the place. Are there
I've
tales of
had an
super
experience on there, for
what's
instance,
that?
very close. That I had a strange experience myself, very close
Okay.
to where Harry Dean was killed.
I'd love to hear
But
it.
I, I'll talk about some of it.
Okay.
I'll do a
That's fair
deal
enough.
there because I still don't know what happened.
Okay.
But I can tell you the physical thing that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
There's a pair of stones very close to where that guy. They're called the King and Queen stones. They're two megaliths that are hidden in woods and they're on a slope, which is
Mm.
odd for megaliths. They're normally out in more open places, but there they are. Um, at the foot of the stones, somebody had killed a sheep, and they basically you can see what's happened there. It's a sacrifice. Someone's
Sacrifice,
placed it.
yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't killed by animals because I've researched this extensively. I took pictures of it. I've asked farmers, people all around, could a fox have done that? No way. Sheep's too big. No way has a fox dragged that sheep off. Absolutely no. No, hasn't done it. Absolutely not. That's been killed by somebody. There's nothing that big in the British Isles that could bring down a sheep of that size
Right.
and drag it away from where the herds are, because the sheep were right across 3 fields away, so it's dragged it a long bloody way. I personally think someone took that sheep, they took it out of place, they cut its throat, because here's the other weird thing: its face was missing.
Oh.
The skin was intact, the body was intact, the hooves, the hide, the wool, the fleece, as it were, sorry. That was all there, the ears, but the face had been peeled off.
Wow.
You just got a skull. Yeah. It's basically like these cattle mutilations people used to talk about.
Right, right. And they
Yeah.
would blame the
That,
aliens for that.
well, yeah, it's very much people doing this. Yeah.
Obviously.
But why? So you say, why on earth would a guy be murdered? Why would somebody do this? They've
Well, that's
peeled his face off and cut his
strange
throat.
ritualistic nonsense.
Yeah, nonsense. Yeah, exactly. Because I can't, unless it's a ceremony or a ritual which they've made of themselves. Yeah, obviously it means something to them. It's it's
Nonsense.
it's it's been suggested to me that the face may have been peeled off in one piece. You know,
Wah!
as a yeah, I know they may have even worn it. I don't even want to think about that. That's so
No,
so that
I see what you're saying though, as a warning or some kind of like, yeah, I can see a whole bunch of taking masks off. The symbology there is incredible, but still, wow.
what a nightmarish scene. Imagine people in a
Mm.
circle and they're all wearing masks made of animals that they've killed and ripped the faces off. I,
Right? And
I
the first thing I went to is like skinwalker type of voodoo.
yeah,
The voodoo's not fair.
people talk about this.
Skinwalker type magic though, definitely.
Well, when you talk about the Skinwalker Ranch, when you talk about these sort of paranormal events, these things, there's always some kind of mutilated animals involved. There's always
Yeah.
that. There's always skin missing, pieces missing. It's always mutilated animals are involved.
No,
It's
even in
almost as,
native culture,
yes,
there was a story that I read, and I've got a lot of folklore, native folklore in my library. And there was a boy who claimed that a witch woman, because there's the natives believe in the healers, and then there were witches, and I can't remember what tribe it was because every tribe believes in something different. But this particular tribe, they believed that they would skin the woman had skinned the owl and then would wear the owl and become the owl and would just appear at night in the boy's room, always for nefarious reasons. Very interesting stories, though.
wow, that's interesting because
Hmm.
I do as I say, I'm not pouring scorn on paranormal investigators because
No.
that's what people want to do. That's fine. But there are others who have a more esoteric outlook on it, and they'll try and look at all aspects. Unfortunately, they always bring bloody aliens into it, and Bigfoot somehow. I don't know how Bigfoot and the aliens get involved in everything, but it is odd how these paranormal events and places happen around the world, and there's always
the
mutilated
esoteric.
animals.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's always mutilated animals involved.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And it's always an esoteric means at the end of it, but you really have to sit back and look at it. That's how it has to be looked at almost, because it's almost always done for an esoteric reason in a place that's supposed to hold great power.
Yeah, but there could be paranormal activity. Is the point I'm trying to make? But
Yes.
we don't know what that paranormal activity is. You mentioned skinwalkers.
Mm-hmm.
Now they always say when a skinwalker's around, everything goes quiet, everything goes silent, the birds stop singing, and then people report hearing this woodpecker type noise, but it's not a woodpecker. You know, we all know what a woodpecker sounds like. No, a different, rapid, kind of staccato breathing almost. Like the Predator, that, you know, in the movie The Predator.
The rattle in the throat.
Yes, you got that rattle, that clicking.
Yeah.
People report hearing that. And that I've walked in some very lonely places, and I felt that feeling. It's just suddenly
Wow.
gone silent, and you almost I've pondered it when I've been driving home, pondering what on earth happened then, and I thought it's almost as if you went back in time. You could have been 800 years previous, just for that 3 seconds. You were just walking across that forest clearing. Things like that. I'm very open to things like that.
I don't disagree with you. I honestly believe that well, I don't believe. I have all kinds of thoughts and feelings like different planes of existence exist simultaneously. And
Yeah,
so I can see how that is a reality. I when we first moved here to Niagara Falls, there was fireworks almost every single night during the summer from May until September or June until September, regardless. Uh, I would be like ridiculously scared by that first bang for the first year every single night, and I couldn't figure why until I personally think that the spirits that walk around in this area that were involved with the Civil War here, I
yeah.
think it rattles them, and it makes there's like an unnerving feeling. And I shouldn't be afraid by fireworks, but I jumped like I was a scared dog. And
Wow.
I honestly feel that it's the spirits in the location can't handle that constant banging, that like because it sounds
Yeah.
like bombs.
Why are they letting fireworks off all the time there?
Because it's tourists and little Las Vegas and Niagara. Has to be.
Ah, I'm with you now. Right.
Hmm. Yeah. It's not, and it's lovely because it's not happening now because tourists aren't allowed here right now. And I mean, for whatever reason, I'm glad that this region and this area is getting a rest.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm finding that at the moment here in our sort of British lockdown. The lockdown's been partially eased. You can go where you like. You just
Hmm.
can't stay overnight or anything like that. You got to come back that day. And obviously, but a lot of the tourist places that are have an admission, they're still closed. That doesn't
Yeah.
stop you walking where you want. Yeah, if you're just a single person on your own, there's no harm in that. That's allowed under the law, reasonably. So I've been doing a lot of that recently, and it's nice because it's been quiet. There's nobody there.
Well, do you find that things have come to life a bit more too, though? Those subtleties are coming to life more. Things that you wouldn't see. Okay, so we have quite a bit of homeless, and the homeless are talking more to things that aren't there. And you know that
Maybe.
it's not all of them, and it's certain ones, and I can carry conversations with some of these homeless people that are talking to things that are never there, and trying to bring them into our conversations. There's been some really interesting exchanges, and like a lot of peripheral vision work, like constantly seeing things. And this is such a there's so much havoc that's been wreaked in this area to get it to where it is, that you
Yeah.
can really feel the unrest, and not even unrest, but there's activity.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always fall back on, I don't know much about your country, but there's always
Mm-hmm.
the old trope of, the Indian burial ground and, that sort of thing. And I've absolutely no doubt that some of the tribes that sort of move through those areas, I know a lot of them were quite transient. They didn't stay in one place for
Oh,
a
absolutely.
particularly
They would just kind
long
of
period
walk
of time.
through here. And
Yeah,
the lakes would be, they were important, and they would be meeting spots. And I'm actually not explaining it well, and I should have notes in front of me, so I'm saying things properly, but we're going to let that go, because a lot of it, what's left here, you have the indigenous, and then you also have everything from the War of 1812 and the
yeah,
Battle of Niagara Falls. Um,
yeah,
so there's quite a bit here, like centuries of, and when it gets quiet, and when it's allowed to be quiet, you get there's more of a sense for it.
yeah, yeah. I think so. I think so. If you're gonna tap in to a feeling, if it's just a sense that I was speaking about at the beginning of this conversation, that feeling of tapping into the lore of the land, the history, the folklore, either you're tapping into that or you're tapping into something maybe a bit deeper, paranormal, possibly a shift in the consciousness or a hole in a dimension, however wild you want to get it. If you're
Sure.
going to feel it, if you're going to contact it, it's going to be now. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, when
It's
it's
going to be
quiet,
around.
right?
Yes,
I love that. And I
absolutely.
love that we've kind of brought this all full circle. Um, Hugh, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I could listen to you for hours more, to be honest. I could honestly just say, tell me stories all day long, but it's much later where you are than it is here. And
It's
I
it's
don't want
okay.
to keep you too long, but I would like to beg one more tale from you. And it's
Okay.
your choice, whichever one you'd like to tell. I'm all ears, and so are my listeners. And then we'll close off the show.
Hmm. Near here are some ruins. A ruined abbey. It's called Boardsley Abbey. It's near a town called Redditch, near Worcester. It's haunted by a black dog. It's frightened archaeologists off. They've actually written it in their diary. A big black dog came and chased us all off. It comes at night time as well. And they say it's Guy de Beauchamp, who was an earl. He was basically the richest man in England. He did a lot of work for Edward Edward Longshanks. He did a lot of work for him. He was the richest man in England at one time. And when he died, he asked to be buried at Boardsley Abbey. He lay there quite some time. The abbey fell into ruins. Henry VIII, obviously the dissolution of the monastery. Henry VIII had the monastery closed. So the abbey fell into ruins like so many other abbeys. But
Hmm.
there he was in his sarcophagus, undisturbed. Guy de Beauchamp, the 10th Earl, just lying there in state. He was known as the Black Dog of Arden. That was his nickname on the battlefield. He was known as the Black Dog. Well, later, years later, obviously it became overgrown. They started building farmland through it and taking the stones away to use them to build walls, everything, because the abbey was long forgotten. And so they tore all the ivy away and knocked the trees down, and there the ruins of the abbey came to light. Almost immediately, this huge black dog began appearing, chasing everybody off. It was howling, slobbering, chasing. It was even following people all the way home. Some people reported they locked themselves in their home and it was appearing at the window. And it was sniffing under the door. A team of archaeologists popped up in the 1950s to look at the place. They were trying to find and trying to map the place out and create a diagram. And they were chased off. They had to leave their food, sleeping bags, everything in there. They were terrified of this huge black dog that turned up and chased them off. Even today, people report seeing the black dog running around at night time, standing on top of the ruins. Because the sarcophagus of Sakai was disturbed. Now his ruins have been placed, they've been reburied, he's been laying in state, they've created a stained glass window to commemorate his memory. And now the black dog's quiet. No one's heard of it since, because he's been laid to rest. That to me is an absolute textbook tale of a typical English ghost there. You've got a knight, you've got a great knight who was killed in battle, he lay in state, his remains were disturbed, so the curse began. You got a black dog haunting the area forever until he safely lay to rest again. And now the black dog hasn't been seen since. Boardsley Abbey is still an eerie place. You see it at night time when it's moonlit. It's all white, the stone, and you can. My God, if I witnessed this hound there, it would scare the living poo out of me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but there it is. That's another tale that sort of comes to mind, which is near here, and the whole county is absolutely chock full of them. I could honestly go on and on and on and on about these stories. Really,
Would you be interested in coming back and telling more tales another time?
Without a second. Yeah, absolutely.
I would
don't need asking twice.
I could honestly have you as a reoccurring guest and just let you go.
Absolutely. I can, obviously be more prepared this time. You just sort of let me sort of rap freestyle about the topics that I like today. And I hope that you've enjoyed what you've heard. I hope your listeners are going to enjoy it as well, as much as they can.
I really appreciated letting you just share. It was needed. I needed to hear some tales. I'm sure that we all need something like this, because I don't know, I feel lifted. And I know that sounds silly, but it's wonderful what sitting with the storyteller will do for you. So I want to thank you very much for joining me today.
No problem at all, Kathy.
And you did a wonderful job, and you were fantastically organized. I don't know what you're talking about. So for anybody who would like to see more of what Hugh is doing, you can go to Mysteries of Mercia, which is on Facebook. Is it a public group?
I believe it is. Yeah, I believe it's a public group. Yes.
I think it is. And come and join us and read a few tales. And
there may be something more in the offing in the future. Let's just say that I'm working on something. So there may be something a little more permanent in the future.
I think that's wonderful, and I love coded messages left at the end. So, this has been a fantastic interview with Hugh Williams. Hugh, do you have anything that you'd like to say to the listeners before you leave?
Keep telling stories. Keep listening to stories. Keep retelling them. Go out, explore, go off the beaten track. If you've heard of something, you've always wanted to see it, go there, explore it, veer off, look around it, follow fables, follow tales. Just get out there and explore. That's all I can say.
I think that's fantastic for last words. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in to listen today. My heart is full, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't very close to breaking into tears. For what reason, I don't know, but I'm going to say it's because this has been wonderful. So until next time, everyone, stay lifted.